Good evening and welcome to the Surly Grognards for Monday, December 12th, 2011. I'm Peter Bowman, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Eric Carlson. How you doing, Eric?
Oi, what's up, humans?
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about going from concept to character in role-playing games. It's one of those little sort of thorny dilemmas that a lot of people actually have trouble with, coming up with a character concept for a game. So, Eric, you're the guy who actually ends up playing more often than I do, since I usually end up DMing. Where do you come up with the character concepts?
Well, usually, first thing I need to do is figure out what the hell kind of game I'm playing in. So usually I have a brief chat with the GM, and then largely pull a bunch of concepts at random out of my head and start bouncing around. Like, for example, say I found out someone's running a medieval Dark Ages fantasy game in the far north. Now, honestly, your first thought is Viking. Let's do a Viking, yes. Let's do something weird. Let's say, I don't know, I think I will play an Arabian sorcerer, or something like that, or a mad scientist. And, yeah, it's just, or is it Orky? What? Never mind. But yeah, it's a lot of it is just throwing ideas around in your head, seeing what sticks, and then throwing them at the GM and seeing what sticks there.
Right. Okay. So I mean, your concept basically just drawing random ideas from your head.
Right.
Do you tend to be influenced by books you've read or movies you've seen and such?
Yeah. I am completely influenced by books I've read and movies I've seen and the like. Those are usually the first things that pop into my head. Like, for example, I was watching Outlaw Star when you started running your space game, so I decided I wanted to play a space pirate. And yeah, I mean, it's I'm sorry, I'm feeling to speak at the moment. I need more bourbon.
Yes, alcohol.
And solution to all of life's problems.
Indeed. Thank you, Homer Simpson. So yeah, that's definitely obviously one of the biggest strengths for things I've found actually about finding concepts is I read a lot. And so I've got a whole bunch of different characters that bounce around in my head over the years of different types, and I find that if I try not to actually
make that character
because that
right.
I'd rather be more original than that, but I like drawing little inklings of ideas out of them. A few other. I don't play a lot. I'm mostly a GM, as I said, but an example I could actually come up with, sort of an interesting little way I came up with the character concept, was for the Shadowrun game that you ran very, 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 very briefly, i.e. one session.
3 sessions?
It wasn't even 3, it was 1 session, dude. One whole session. I kind of like the character, but... But the character, I came up with the character concept entirely because I was watching Criminal Minds, and one of the characters uttered the line, serial killers often make the best profilers. And right there, bam, sociopath profiler.
He was a great character for that whole session.
Yeah. I had to completely creep the fuck out of Chris. That was awesome.
Yes, that was brilliant. Chris is not easily creeped out.
And now I'll just...
Yeah, I find stuff like that, is a great place for, building the frameworks of the personality.
Right.
I will often subconsciously start building the personality around characters from television shows or cartoons or comics or books that I've seen or read.
Yep. And I'll admit, there are times when I build a character I don't really have a concept in mind, per se. Another an example of that is Nalem, actually.
Right.
I had a sort of loose concept, the smuggler with the smuggler who is basically trending towards being a good guy. I mean, he's Han Solo in a funny suit, basically.
Right.
That was the initial sort of framework for him, but that wasn't what the character ended up being. Again, as usual, the whole sort of growth of the character during play often will change your concept to a certain degree.
Right.
But that's another topic for another time, really. But I mean, as I said, I didn't really have a character concept for Nalum when I built him. I just basically said, okay, I want to play a scoundrel because they look neat.
Right.
So yeah, I occasionally don't actually have character concepts when I build characters. I usually tend to actually come up with the character's personality and background during play. Well, I don't usually, but I do that from time to time.
Well, that's occasionally the seed of the concept right there. You're just you're in a new system. Let's check this. Let's learn a bit about the world or the system or something. And what happens if I plug slot A into tab Q? Hey, that doesn't explode instantly. Let's see how it works.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I usually try to come up with a actual personality concept before I build the character, but it does vary by game and by system for me, whether I bother doing that or not. But yeah, so maybe that's maybe sort of an example of sort of other characters where sort of how you came from the idea of floating your head to the actual concept would be helpful.
Jeebus. It's so second nature to me. I'm just realizing how second nature this is to me that it doesn't.
Right.
It's difficult to articulate.
So, but let's take an example here. Why don't we? Here's a different idea. I'll pitch to you a putative game, and we'll sort of verbally work through a character concept.
Yes, that works.
All right. So let's say we're going to start with a. Okay, let's start with a modern day game. Let's go with sort of a horror theme.
Okay.
Sort of urban investigators into urban horror. So the player characters, in theory, are investigators who are looking into sort of horror going on in a modern setting.
I'm playing Shaggy.
All right, so you're starting.
That's my character concept. I am the burnt-out hippie who has seen too much and will panic at everything.
All right, so that's a start right there. And so, how did you land there?
Basically, you started talking about contemporary. Here's the idea. You started talking about a contemporary thing, so I instantly started thinking about what things that might interest me that would work that might be fun in a contemporary setting.
Okay.
Like, obviously, space Viking isn't going to work in there.
Right.
Although, that might be interesting, actually. How contemporary are we? Are we talking, like...
Modern day.
We're talking modern day, but are we talking, like, Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, or are we talking, like, Call of Cthulhu?
That's a good question. But let's continue with your Shaggy.
Okay. But, yeah, so the first thing that popped in my head when you said modern day was, okay, what works in modern day? I started going through, like, different characters in my head. You said horror. That brought me to X-Files and Scooby-Doo, obviously, and Lovecraft's short stories, and any number of horror movies that I've seen.
Right.
Actually, the horror movies I went to before Scooby-Doo, because I instantly thought, ooh, I can play one of those annoying teenagers that's there to get killed. See how long it can last. And then I started thinking, no, even better than that, I'll play Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Which is ridiculous and sounds like it could be a lot of fun.
Right, and from there, I mean, you can actually move into a somewhat serious character even, amazingly enough.
Certainly. Especially if I take the burnt-out hippie that panics at everything, and the reason why he panics at everything is he's actually had a lot of paranormal experiences, or maybe has a doctorate in the occult or something, and realizes just how real all of this stuff is, is why he freaks out.
There we go. There's a character concept right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's. I like it, Eric. Well, let's try reversing that here. Why don't you give me a campaign sort of noodle, and I'll see what I can come up with.
Okay. We are looking at ancient China. We're going to do a lot with the various folklore and mythology in that area. I think almost Legend of the Five Rings, but
in China,
possibly, but with more intrigue at court than fighting demons.
Okay. All right. So we're looking at ancient China. Right. So we're looking at ancient China, and we're looking at court intrigue.
Right.
So, all right. So partially will depend on how ancient, but my first thought leaps to a Taoist alchemist, possibly of some sort. So I'm sort of looking at someone who is not directly tied, possibly sort of like an alchemist who helps out like the palace guard as sort of like a medic to a certain degree. Think sort of almost like a combination sort of doctor and CSI, but in ancient China.
Okay, that's another one.
You're talking palace intrigue, and you're going, having someone who can do sort of the quasi-forensics of the time, and I have to do research into exactly what would be remotely feasible. But I hear that, started thinking about that, started thinking about the medic thing, and then I randomly flash over to Brother Cadfile.
Right. Which is funny, because as I was plucking this out of my the game system out of my head, I instantly started thinking a Quartus.
Right. Well, that's another great example.
Yeah.
I like that too.
Yeah, and that's already we've got like the beginnings of an investigative team for ancient China there.
Right.
Now we need muscle.
Dear Lord, we would.
But yeah, that's
honestly, at that point, if like a third player came along and wanted to play a member of the Palace Guard, we're done. I mean.
Yeah, all set.
So that's sort of a quick and dirty character ideas, just popping off the top of our heads. I mean, as I said, I was thinking there sitting ancient China to start, so I'm going to be Chinese most likely. You said palace intrigue, so I figured it should be around the court, somewhere around the court. And I've always liked the idea of playing a sort of scientisty type in that era. So an alchemist, sort of an alchemist, guy who does not just alchemy, but working with herbal stuff and such. I can't remember the actual term for it, but you know what I mean.
Right. And the other thing is, you could also just go completely like off the wall, ridiculous concept for the gamer setting and see if that works. Like say the modern horror thing. What if I wanted to play? I think I will play Batman. I'm going to play a man who I'm going to play a street vigilante, convinced that this is all fake and crazy, and I'm going to have a utility belt filled with crap.
I like it. So yeah, that's another take on it. It would work within the genre. Boy, he'd be in for a rude shock, but whatever.
But it turns out it really was a vampire, not some vampire cult. Holy crap.
Clearly, I'm losing my mind.
Which is why I'm going to start dressing like a bat now.
Say what? So, yeah, there's...
Batman.
So, yeah, there's... Basically, so when it boils down to it, kind of coming up with concepts, my advice for players, especially for new players, is, go over what characters you know of in fiction. Think about them. Look at what elements about that character are interesting to you. And, right there, Eric's example of, Shaggy. is a brilliant idea for a modern sort of street level horror game. He's, you're not actually going to be playing Shaggy. You'll be playing. He moved from Shaggy to the burnout hippie who studied, parapsychology. And
Scooby.
That's a little trickier, but.
Well, you wouldn't actually be playing a dog, but you'd be playing.
So Scooby's role. Okay, I can see that. So that's sort of where we cut. That's that's one starting point. Is looking at characters from fiction that you think are interesting and draw elements from them and see if you can craft them into a character. Again, as I said, the other thing I find that actually works fairly well is just keeping an ear out for phrases that might trigger a concept in your head. As I said, much like the yeah, Dan says, phew, we almost went to a dark place with the role-playing Scooby bit. Yeah. But yes, or an awesome place.
Mecha Rage says, for example, a friend of mine that wanted to play D&D wanted to make a character similar to the Lena Inverse.
From the Slayers. Great, one of my favorite anime series, and a phenomenally wonderful character.
Yes.
Honestly, that sort of character is actually fairly easy to do, since since Lena's an archetypical, infernal warlock or a fire-based mage, either or would work. But from a mechanical standpoint, that's the less important thing, as opposed to trying to get a feel for the personality, because Lena's less about what she does, although blowing things up is what she does. And more about her personality and style when she does it.
And that's the key to any good character is personality and style.
Yeah. Because you can have a collection of stats and it won't really matter unless you actually, you're just playing. As much of the game as I do enjoy the gaming side of things in tabletop role-playing games, I also really do want to have an actual character to roleplay, because otherwise I'm just playing a war game. And I like war games; they're great fun, but I like playing role-playing games too. But yeah, being able to make a personality with class mechanics can help, indeed. And that's actually the next thing we probably should talk about, actually. Betham Z says, I made a Mr. Sinister character once. They didn't want to play with me anymore after that role-playing experience. Well, if you're playing in a game where you're playing Mr. Sinister, everyone else is playing the X-Men, I don't blame them.
Supervillain concept is so much fun when everyone else is good.
Yeah, but it causes serious problems, and we kind of touched on that last week. The problems with playing the evil character in the good party. It can be done, but at any rate, the next thing we have to talk about, though, I think, is going from the concept you have to actually making the character. And that occasionally is a little bit trickier than you think it would be.
Yeah, and a lot of that boils down to what system you're playing in.
Right. If you're playing something like, say, Hero System or GURPS, it's actually pretty easy.
That's easy.
They're point-based generic systems, so honestly, there's no real, especially Hero System, which basically it's build whatever the hell you want as long as it doesn't, it's not so cheesy the GM will make you leave.
But say like Dungeons and Dragons, like how would I go about building Shaggy in Dungeons and Dragons?
That could be tricky.
Oh, yes. LaShawn says, so you prefer to pick your personality before you build a character. Yes, the personality is a big part of what kind of character, of the character for me.
Yeah, a large chunk of the time I try to come up with the character concept, as we said, not just personality, but sort of who they are before I actually try to build the character. I do occasionally do it the other direction sometimes, and that's a lot of fun too, but that's not really what we're talking about today. Going from character to going from the mechanics of the character to the concept is quite doable, and it's especially doable in systems like, say, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
especially
I do that. I do that also.
Yeah, I mean,
like I'll be looking through the rule book for the book, and I'll be like, this is a cool idea. I shall play this. How do I build this?
So, for instance, like, Mechanized says he's had a character he's been wanting to build for a long time in 4th edition, but it never really was possible until just recently when they released some new rules. It wasn't possible to do it the way he wanted to do it, I should say, specifically.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like, as I said, in the Star Wars game that Eric and I both played in, run by our mutual friend Chris, my character literally, I just started off saying I want to play a scoundrel, specifically a smuggler. And I guess I'll go with, say, Celestin. They look like they'd be kind of good for scoundrels. They've got a dex bonus. And then I started building the personality during play. However, most of the time I prefer going from designing the character concept first and then actually building them from the keel, building the character around that.
Yeah, like
and sometimes the character concept is largely mechanical. Also, it doesn't just have to be,
Oh, certainly. Like that. Say, for example, in my case, the D&D game you were running. I was like, barbarians are available, half-orcs are available. I shall play a half-orc barbarian.
Right.
Now, why am I out being a half-orc barbarian?
Exactly. And such like I've built characters, and it's like I want to try. I want to build this. I want to build a character, who does X in the system, and then I look for ways to do that within the system, and that's not always easy to say. And that's not necessarily their personality; it's what they do, and those are two aspects of the character you have to come up with. That you have to come up with at some point is who are they and what do they do, and those are sort of the two big keys to the concept of a character, in my opinion. But yeah, moving from concept to character does tie into system. So, I mean, as we were just talking about, let's take Eric's horror character there.
Yeah, let's look at Shaggy here.
Let's look at Shaggy here. So we will go with some systems that we both know. So we'd start with, say, how you build that, say, in Shadow. How challenging would that be to build it, say, in using, say, I don't know, Shadowrun?
Okay. Well, Shadowrun.
It's not quite the same, not quite the right time period, but I'm just talking.
Right.
It's
we'll advance things a little bit. He's human. He has no money. He's not magical. Therefore, he's going to be all about his stats and skills.
Right.
And he's going to have a ton of skills.
Right.
There are going to be almost all things like cooking and anything that would aid him in running away. Is not going to have a lot in the way of combat skills. Like disguise would be one he would certainly have. I'd probably, because of the way Shadowrun uses this sort of tiered priority system, first priority would probably be skills for him.
Right.
Cooking and metabolism, yes.
Thank you, Batan Z. So
yeah, like I would probably start off with skills that make sense to that character. So it'd be like a lot of knowledge skills for like parapsychology, occultism, mysticism, folklore, that kind of stuff. Probably throw in. He would certainly need disguise so he can pull off the zany. Yes, definitely super dex.
Run away. Honestly, he sounds like he's a fairly easy character to build in Shadowrun.
Yes, actually, it would be really easy to build in Shadowrun. I would just end up having to take some kind of combat skills at some point. So I think I could use them all on other things.
Right.
The limit of that I'd be able to invest in each skill.
Excellent. Honestly, it sounds like an interesting Shadowrun character to play. So yeah, I mean, Shadowrun sounds like an easy one to do it in.
Right.
Let's try to think of something that might be a bit more challenging. Like GURPS would be stupid easy because, again, as I said, generic system. Yeah.
First ed D&D. How would I build Shaggy in first ed D&D?
Okay, let's see. How would you do this, Eric? I'm fascinated to hear this one.
Okay.
Well, again, actually, this one's not that hard either if you think about it.
You just make a thief.
Yeah, you make a thief, or a thief is probably your best bet. And honestly, there's not much actually building a character in first edition D&D.
This is true.
You're just, you roll your stats, you hope they're good, you choose your class, and then you play the personality, and that's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think the Bard is available in first ed, or if it was.
It is, but it's special.
Yeah.
Because you have to start. You have to basically start as like a druid, then become a thief, and then become a fighter or something like that. I forget the order. You have to go through like 3 different classes.
Yeah.
You have to level up in 3 different classes before you actually can become a bard. It's just insane.
Bard would be perfect for Shaggy.
Yeah, that would work well in other iterations
of D&D.
Yes. No, I mean you'd be talking about like a third edition D&D game. You build him as a bard, just so that you actually are incompetent enough. These bards in third edition kind of sucked.
They really did.
So yeah, that's a
Another thing I'm just gonna throw out there is an image of the character in my head goes a long way for the concept. In fact, I often start with that also.
Yeah, you're more of a visual guy than I am.
Right.
I mean, you do art for a webcomic, and you went to art school. Whereas I'm an economist.
Right.
So I'm at home with the numbers and such.
Yeah, like that was something else. Like when you threw out the modern horror thing. Like for some reason I instantly went to someone skinny because it's horror and fat guys are funny.
Right.
And being a fat guy, I know this for a fact. So yeah, I instantly went to someone skinny, and horror made me think he's sort of cringing and big wild eyes. Probably not because he's scared, but because he knows too much. And disheveled. Yeah, there we go. Yes, and tall, as Batron Z says.
Excellent. So, interestingly enough, so my next thing I think I'm going to ask you is, Eric, what would you say is the hardest character you've had to conceptualize, take from concept to system, that you've actually done yourself?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, where have you had the most trouble?
It was a Subaru's game, which you think would be easy to take from concept to character.
Yeah.
The problem was I had so many options in how to build it. The character concept was a shape changer who wasn't very good at fine shape shifting, but could do. Basically, I was playing a Shoggoth that could take human form.
Okay. Right. Okay. I believe you mentioned him before.
Yes, and I wanted him to be kind of broken and insane. So, how to build all of this into the character became really, really difficult. In that A, I had a lot of options, and B, not all of them seemed to fit the idea perfectly. Like. Okay, I got alternate form. How does that work? Okay, now the alternate form is globular and has extra limbs, but where does that work into actual mechanical stuff? And yeah, it was a mess. The character actually ended up being relatively powerful in the end, but I had an expert with the system helping me out, but it was a bear getting what was in my head onto paper.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I guess I can see that especially for someone who's not used to sort of systems with that many options.
Yeah, it was also my first time with the system, which was difficult.
Yeah, that's often where I have the most trouble myself, is with systems I'm not used to. For instance, back to the Shadowrun character, I had real trouble building him because I didn't know the system in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And really didn't make much progress with it until I had Leland help me build it. And he ended up being much more badass in combat than I actually intended to be. But
Leland's a system gamer, so
yeah, so am I to a large degree. But
yeah,
it was one of those. Yeah, okay, we'll do that. And then looked at him afterwards and like, holy crap, he has 10 dice with knife. What the fuck?
It's also hard to make a character who sucks in combat in Shadowrun.
This is true, actually.
Because it's assumed at some point you're going to be shooting people dead.
Yep. So that was one of the harder ones I've had. That's one of the characters I've had trouble with moving from character to concept.
Yeah, like personally, I tend to shy away from crazy off-the-wall character concepts with systems I don't know.
Right. Because it's hard to do it when you don't know the system.
Exactly. Like, someone in the chat before things started mentioned that he made a luchador in 4th edition, which is awesome, by the way. Props to you.
Yep.
I never would have thought of doing something that crazy my first time playing 4th ed.
Right. Yeah, the interesting thing is seeing, character concepts from people who, I've seen some people, try to come in with weird character concepts they weren't sure how to build in various systems, like in 4th edition or in X, and any given system, and they've never played it before. And it's interesting seeing how they react to that, because for some of them they handle it well. They just ask the people who know the system better, and they roll with it. And some find it kind of frustrating that they don't really understand what's being done to create their character.
That is something that I've run into also, is I get frustrated trying to build a character in a system I don't know if I vary too far from the expected norms.
Right.
And that it becomes less fun for me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Of course, once I have a few sessions in my belt, I have a better grasp of the mechanics. Then I'll start coming up with crazy shit that I could have played, and buyer's remorse.
Oh, I could have done this.
I totally could have done this, and then I'd have like an army of gnomish assault robots. Eric, we're playing a sci-fi game. Yes, and there would be gnomes and robots. I could do it this way.
Okay. Welcome to the insanity of gaming with Eric, people. Robots show up all the time.
Oh, come on. I haven't even touched into the disembodied biomechanical vagina's tentacles.
I wish you hadn't. At any rate, woo! The other thing that I've seen, that, show up from time to time is people asking to try to recreate their favorite character from a various thing in a given system. And that's it's a simple character concept, and we sort of touched on that a little bit earlier. But one of the things you see all the time, people who want to play something like, as Max Rage pointed earlier, someone wanted to play Lena Inverse in 4th edition. I've seen many people ask they want to play Ichigo Kurosaki from Bleach in 4th edition. And it's a fun thing to actually sit down and try to actually design the character. Just because it's kind of fun to do it. I find that an interesting, fun thing to do. I'm not sure I actually want to play the character per se, unless I could come up with...
Martin Sheen's president from the West Wing in 4th edition.
Well, you'd have to convince someone that you'd be allowed to be the president of a very large and powerful country.
But that's another example of it. How the hell do you do that?
That's one thing that the system doesn't cover. That's political stuff outside of the actual character design.
Exactly.
Also, I'm not sure President Bartlett is much of an adventurer type, being, an economist and
a president.
But yeah, Light Yagami from Death Note would be another character to be hard to build in 4th edition, largely because most of what he does isn't really him. He has a powerful artifact and is very smart.
He does a lot of manipulation of various people.
Yeah, and that's not really a 4th edition sort of concept, really.
Yeah, you give him a stupid high charisma, and you dump tons of stuff in social skills.
Yeah, and high charisma, high intelligence.
Yeah.
I guess you build him like a bard maybe or something like that, and make sure he has a powerful artifact.
Well, you could still play him without the cookie. Like, you could do the entire adventure around him getting the cookie.
Sure, and as I said, building as a bard, which gives you a bunch of social skills, and access to powers like Words of Friendship, which allows you to get a bonus to your diplomacy, and you can get a feat to make it apply to bluff instead. I guess I'd end up building him as a bard in 4th edition, but
He'd work really well in a supers game.
yeah, he'd be much better
as a villain, as someone to work against.
Yeah, he's much.
He the whole time he'd be trying to figure out everyone's real identities.
Yep.
So that he can kill them with his magic book.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I've seen that. As I said, I've seen countless people asking how you build Ichigo in 4th edition. And that's not really that hard in my personal opinion, but that's neither here nor there. And I won't go into that right now.
Dude, how do you do the holification?
Dude,
we're not going to get into that.
We're not going to get into that, and it's also not it's surprisingly not hard. At any rate, there are other things like I've seen if you talk to if you go on the champions board for the hero system, which is the superhero thing, you see everyone talking about how they build various superhero characters from the comic books in hero system. Now it's an open point based system, so that's not really that hard. And I mean, it's interesting seeing people trying to build various characters under certain point limits.
Well, an excellent idea would be trying to build the main character from Breaking Bad in the hero system.
Interesting. I don't know if Breaking Bad to actually do that, but
well, and make him able to hang with superheroes.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I was interestingly enough, I've seen characters the interesting thing is it turns out that in some ways it's easy. It's with the beginning characters of allotment of points, it's easier to build Superman than it is to build Batman in hero system.
I can see that.
Because Batman is has 8 billion skills, and Superman just has a simple set of powers.
Yeah.
Unless you want to get into the wonky stuff.
My experience in hero system is limited to say the least, but
yeah. So yeah, that's
yeah, we're totally unprepared. We're sorry.
Yeah, well, we're somewhat unprepared. Also, I mean, we've actually hit the point where I was actually thinking we were probably going to get to just talking about it. But I mean, can you think of any other difficulties any other sort of odd difficulties of moving from character to from concept to character?
Most of the ones that I've encountered have been surrounded by the system.
Right.
Whatever system you're playing in. How do I play a humanitarian relief worker in the Warhammer 40,000 universe? How does that even work and not get dead quickly?
Right.
Or how do I play a space Viking in a Star Wars game? I want to be a space Viking. How do I do that in Star Wars?
Right, and so on.
Well, I'm thinking the D20 Star Wars.
Yes.
But you could probably do it in a more open system.
Yeah. That's. I think that wraps up our sort of discussion on that really right for the moment. I really can't think of much else to say at the moment. Anything else you can think about, Eric?
Questions and answers time.
Yeah, so we'll throw it open to the chat here. If you've got any questions that you want us to answer regarding tabletop gaming in general, and honestly, of any sort of tabletop gaming, Eric and I have done role-playing games and tabletop war games. I also done a fair bit of CCG, so if you want to ask about those, I guess you could. But if you want to get Eric in on this, you're probably going to want to stick to RPGs or tabletop board games.
Collectibles. I say to your collectibles.
All right, next rate asks, what do you think of sacrificing optimization for character concept?
I think that is awesome. In fact, I will sometimes I will do that on purpose. In fact, I usually do that on purpose.
Yeah, I do it all the time. Also, there are often like the optimal choice of a skill, a power, a feat, and I'll often go, well, that doesn't make sense with the character I want to play. I'm going to go with something slightly less good that fits the character concept.
Right,
now, I will say this: sacrificing top optimization. I don't like gimping myself to do that.
Yeah, I'm not going to go triple myself because then I'm just a load for the rest of the group.
Right, and I've seen I know of people who sort of feel that it's weaker characters are better for role playing, and to them I say, "Fie, they're wrong." It doesn't have to be the case.
It doesn't have to be the case. It does make for easier role playing because then you can play up that flaw.
Yeah, it gives you an obvious flaw to role play, but yeah. Bottom Z asks, what is a good game if you want to ease into actual Dungeons and Dragons?
Actual Dungeons and Dragons. Are we talking about 4th edition, I'm guessing?
So basically what you're asking is, what is a good sort of introductory role-playing game for someone who's never played a role-playing game before?
Feng Shui.
Yeah, that's one of the best ones I can think of.
Feng Shui, it's really easy to make a character. The mechanics are simple and easy to use, and is actually as I understand it, the inspiration for a lot of 4th Ed stuff.
There's some 4th Ed stuff that was inspired by Feng Shui. The minions were the big thing.
Meckeridge says, I'm guessing we're going back to the optimization thing that he asked earlier. For example, a config build would be better with a rapier instead of monk unarmed strike because of the huge light blade support, but the concept of the character is someone that kills people with his fist in a brutal way.
Yep.
Yes. No. Drop the rapier and punch people to death.
Yep.
Number one, it's awesome. and number two, it fits the character better, and you're not dropping that much. At least I don't think so. You know the system better than I do.
You are giving up a fair bit. That said, it falls in the category, more power to you. I mean...
And you're punching people to death.
So, yeah, that's... long story short, optimization... Sacrificing some optimization for character concept is something I do not only think is okay, I actually heavily endorse. And say is a good thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We agree again, so we're not going to have fun fireworky arguments.
Well, we generally won't have much in the way of fireworky arguments. We'll mostly sort of agree to disagree, I'm guessing, in general. But it's not like I'm sort of arguing with some other people we know.
Right.
So, any other questions from the Peanut Gallery?
In regards to tabletop war games, are you either of you fans of grimdark direction that GW is going towards? Did they ever moved away from the grimdark direction? Honestly.
Well, they kind of did. If you look back at way it looked at 40K, especially the way Rogue Trader looked originally.
Okay. Yeah.
They moved away from it for a while, and they became a little bit less goofy. They became a little bit more goofy grimdark.
I've got for me, 40K is all about the grimdark. I mean, if you don't want grimdark, why are you playing 40K? And it's, I mean, just look at it from the surface. It's a horrible regime where they will happily spend billions of lives for a foot of land.
Yep.
And that's the good guys.
With massive air quotes.
And they moved away from it for a little bit, and honestly, I felt like they were kind of selling out a little bit, but I'm happy to see they're moving back towards it. And if you want silliness, orcs are right there.
Yeah, honestly, my personal take on it has always been that it's so grimdark it actually gets kind of comical, in my opinion.
Oh, damn straight.
And I just can't. I want people. I know people who take the 40K universe seriously, and I just kind of laugh at them. I mean, in my head. I don't actually laugh out loud at them because that's rude.
The 40K universe is a great place for it is great for, say, Call of Cthulhu in space.
I could see that.
I can't think of a better published setting for Call of Cthulhu in space than 40K.
Sure. I mean, I honestly.
And that's if you want to take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's also a great place for paranoia.
Yeah, I can see that. Basically, I've always felt that the 40K universe, and the Fantasy Battle universe too, for that matter, are much better designed for. They were designed from the keel out for sort of a setting for a war game, and not a role-playing game, and I think it shows.
Having played their Fantasy Flight's Dark Heresy, it works pretty damn well as an RPG as long as you know what you're getting into.
Sure. I didn't say it's inherently impossible to do it. I'm saying I think that it's clearly the universe itself is set up better as a universe for a role-playing game as opposed to a war game as opposed to a role-playing game. It's set up for conflict between between various powers.
Right.
And isn't inherently set up for your typical role-playing experience.
Now, on the other end, I haven't been paying too much attention to 40K, honestly, because I haven't been playing it. I've been playing fantasy, and I do like the direction they're going with fantasy in general. And it's not just because they play Skaven and they don't have cavalry, and I'm glad to see cavalry sucks now.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I haven't played the new edition of Fantasy Battle, but I've read through it and watched a little bit of it being played, and I'm not a fan, but I can understand why some people might be. I think they added a little bit too much randomness into the game, and overemphasized magic.
They've always overemphasized or underemphasized magic, so...
Yes.
It's a pendulum.
Oh, God, yeah. The pendulum play balance is
is all about the pendulum.
The pendulum play balance has always been there and always will be there. It enables them to sell things that weren't selling in the previous edition.
If you want game balance, go play War Machine or Hordes, honestly.
Yeah. Bottom Z asks, have either of us played a game called End of All? No, I've never heard of it.
I haven't heard of that. What is it?
That is an interesting question. I will now type that into... Google will save us.
The Great Oracle.
I
don't even have to give it drugs. Dead air. D&D-ish game. I think the answer is there is no, we haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
Aha! Wikipedia. Thank you, sir.
Yes, but long story short, no, neither of us have played it, so we really can't talk about it much.
It's Russian.
It's in Cyrillic at least. I don't know if it's Russian or some other Cyrillic.
Yeah, it might be
It could be almost anything. Bulgarian. Yeah, I can't read that. So no, we haven't played it, and Exalted. I've actually played Exalted a little bit. It's White Wolf's high fantasy game. It's not bad. It's not bad for a White Wolf game. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a big fan of White Wolf's game system, as Eric knows.
Right. I have not played Exalted. It seems, although I do know a little bit about it, it seems like it could be a really fun game if handled appropriately. or it could devolve into an angst-ridden pissing match between superheroes. Again, a lot of that depends on who you're playing with and who's running the game. Honestly, I'll try anything once. So.
Yeah, Dan, I think you are thinking of Exalted, Dan. Because you're basically playing the avatars of gods to a certain degree as Soul or Exalted. It's a good game. The second edition fixes a bunch of the problems I had with the first edition rules. It's still a White Wolf game, so I'm still not a huge fan of the system, but the game rules kind of cool. Does anyone else have any questions? Or, things you want to...
And the whole Exalted bit, there was a game that came out like 10 years ago. I don't know if it's still supported or even being published now, called Nominee. You played Angels and Demons on Earth.
I've heard some interesting things about it. I've never played it myself.
And it just seemed like a neat idea for a game. Particularly when you mixed Angels and Demons, working towards the same goal, which might be, I don't know, stopping the apocalypse. No one's ready yet.
Yeah. So if does anyone else have any questions? Or do we want to wrap it up here?
I know I'm a terrible guy at this, but
we're doing fine.
All right.
If no one else has any questions, I think we can wrap it up for tonight. Been going for about 50 minutes, which is
great. I made one up here.
Oh, I missed that. Do I know if there's any third-party content settings for 4th edition D&D like there was for 3.5? Yes, there actually is some. I don't remember the names of it off the top of my head. But you can find some that, if you look carefully on the web. If I remember correctly, there are books like The Quintessential Fighter and The Quintessential Wizard and such. I don't know how well balanced they were, but I remember seeing them not long after 4th edition came out.
I know that, well, I can't say I know. I've heard rumors from reliable sources saying that Iron Kingdoms is looking to start supporting their RPG world again, or Privateer Press is looking to start supporting Iron Kingdoms again. Whether that means they're going to start doing Pathfinder or 4th Ed or just stick with 3.5, I can't say for sure. But I would imagine they would move either to 4th Ed or 3.5 or Pathfinder.
I'm guessing they'll probably move towards Pathfinder.
Well, there would be less work.
That's why. Especially since Pathfinder did come up with that sort of gun magey type class that they introduced recently.
Oh, right, I heard about that. Yeah, that wasn't stolen from Privateer Press at all. I shouldn't say that. It's a pretty cool idea, and I'm sure other people come up with it. But
yep. So before we go, any last thoughts you have on character concepts and moving from them to character to actually building character, Eric?
Basically, just throw ideas at your GM and watch stuff that may or may not be appropriate to the game setting. Nothing says you can't play, say, I don't know, Colonel Tai in Ancient China. Actually, Colonel Tai would work well in Ancient China.
Yeah,
Colonel
probably.
Tai would be awesome in Ancient China. What am I talking about?
Long story short, come up with, whatever ideas are floating in your head, run them by someone else, bounce them off each other. Brainstorming is a great way to come up with character concepts. I didn't mention this earlier, and as always, my usual rule of thumb is when you have a character concept, talk to your DM about it.
Axe Cop would be a weird guy for Ancient China.
Yes.
Go play Axe Cop in Ancient China.
And on Axe Cop, I think we'll wrap up for the evening. This has been Surly Grognards. Thanks for watching. If you want to get in contact with me, you can find me on my Twitter which is @MechaGM. I also have a blog, which is at blogspot.com/MechaGM. You can also find me on both Facebook and on Google+. There is Peter Bowman. Eric
I don't exist.
Other than the webcomic he does the artist for, which is BostonArcanum.com. Go check it out. It's actually quite cool. Anything else, Eric, before we go?
I don't exist. I'm a fictional character.
Eric does not exist. He's a fictional character. Go check out, as I said, go check out Boston Arcanum. It's cool stuff.
Yeah. Go check it out. Shameless self-plugging.
Yep. So, and I will be posting the recording of this on my blog sometime either late tonight or tomorrow, hopefully. Other than that, if you got questions you want answered in the next episode or in a future episode, please leave questions either on my Twitter or in the comment section in my blog. Again, the blog is at or is it mechagm.blogspot.com? Let me get that actually. Yeah, it's mechagm.blogspot.com. I'm sorry, I was wrong before. And bostonarcanum.com for Eric's webcomic, Boston Arcanum. So that's it for me, and for Eric, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you all see you all next week. I think next week we'll
Jesse's sick.
Yeah. Who knows who'll be sitting in next week? It'll probably be either Jesse or Eric, depending on what's up. Jesse is feeling under the weather today. But at any rate, thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you all next week. Thanks, and enjoy. Take care.
Bye, humans.